Live from Toronto, Canada, The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio, AM 740.
And welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. Come on in, weary traveler. Hang your cloak on a peg, grab a stool, and come gather around the fire. There are stories to be told, and you are among friends. And I am coming to you live from my little studio beneath the stairs in Thornhill, Ontario, just north of Toronto. My technical producer, Carlos Cagina, is steering this ship this evening from behind the big audio board at Zoomerplex in the Liberty Village neighborhood of Toronto. And Ryan White is producing the live stream from his basement lair somewhere in Toronto. And we are live streaming, incidentally, on the YouTube channel Strange Planet. So get on up there and hit that red sub button. And let's see if we can get to 20,000 subscribers in the next month or two. Speaking of Ryan, I don't know where Ryan lives. He's never invited me to his house. Never. Now, of course, he has a perfect excuse. But how are you, incidentally, managing with the self-imposed quarantines and the social distancing? People are hurting financially, of course. People are scared, obviously. People are getting very sick. Some people are dying. But I know we're going to come out of this on the other end better people, closer to friends and family, kinder to people. And most importantly, when things get back to normal, and they will, when things get back to normal, I think we're all going to be more grateful. And you can only achieve happiness when you're grateful, when you show gratitude. UFO researcher, author Len Kasten is standing by to discuss his new must-read, Dark Fleet, the secret Nazi space program, and the battle for the solar system. And he'll be here for the full 2 hours, and we will open up the phone lines for questions and comments in the second hour. So keep your powder dry. Allow the conversation to develop and marinate, if you will. And then in the second hour, we'll open up the phone lines and you can have at them. In Dark Fleet, Len reveals that the Nazis did not really lose World War II. They made it appear that way in order to divert attention from the alliance between the Fourth Reich and the race of aliens known as the Reptilians, an ancient galactic civilization obsessed with conquest and domination. And after the German surrender in 1945, the Nazi-Reptilian alliance infiltrated the U.S. military-industrial complex. Through Operation Paperclip, the Nazis and Reptilians removed their political opponents, such as the Kennedys, and moved into policy-making positions in post-war America, infiltrating aerospace companies, banking, media, and the U.S. and government, including NASA and the CIA. But their real target was not the United States. It was the solar system. Len Kasten is a UFO researcher and freelance writer. He's a former member of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena and the Mutual UFO Network. He's the author of The Secret History of Extraterrestrials, Secret Journey to Planet Serpo, and Alien World Order. And again, his latest is Dark Fleet, the secret Nazi space program and the battle for the solar system. Len Kasten, welcome to The Conspiracy Show. How are you, my friend? Do we have Len? Apparently not. We're not sure where he is. All right. Well, he's supposed to be joining us from, where is Len tonight? He's in Casa Grande in Arizona. Well, Carlos, if you could raise Len, get him back into the conversation, that would be helpful. In the meantime, let me direct your attention to my free monthly newsletter, Inner Sanctum. Have you subscribed yet? No? Well, it's real easy. Here's all you need to do. Go to my website, strangeplanet.ca, strangeplanet.ca. That's my website. That's the portal to this radio program, my podcast, and so forth. And there's a button there. As soon as you get on the landing page, it says click here to register. All we need is your first name, last name, and your email address. And then starting in April, if you haven't subscribed yet, starting in April, you'll receive Inner Sanctum free every month, delivered right to your email inbox. And once you're registered, you're also automatically registered for my monthly draw for Strange Planet merchandise at the Strange Planet shop. And there are T-shirts and mugs and tote bags and socks and phone cases, you name it. All right, so strangeplanet.ca, register for Inner Sanctum. It's free. It comes every month, delivered right to your email inbox, Inner Sanctum. All right, we are still trying to raise Len Kasten, and it says he's in the chat. He's online. He's in our chat. Not sure if he can hear me, but we're not hearing him. So, Carlos, back in studio. Do you want to take a timeout, and we'll try to raise Len? Can we do that? Let's do it. All right. We will reach out to Len Kasten and discuss the secret Nazi space program and the battle for the solar system. This is The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Serrett. Back with more in a moment.
You want the truth? You can handle the truth. The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio. To get the truth, call Richard now at 416-360-0740 or toll free at 1-866-740-4740. In this day of social distancing, it's time to rethink the home show. How to discover the latest and greatest while avoiding large gatherings. It's simple. Invite Royal Home Improvements to bring the home show to your home. Our project coordinators are up to date on the trends, what's coming, and what remains classic in everything from kitchen design to backyard deck materials. We just don't need a booth and a bottle of hand sanitizer to show you. We're prepared to unpack our ideas and samples in the comfort of your home. Royal Home Improvements will arrive with 50 years of experience and leave behind a free estimate for your renovation that our licensed tradespeople are eager to get started on. The home show at your home. Let's bump elbows and share ideas for your future. Zoomers 55 plus save the tax on projects valued up to $100,000. Call 416-236-4400 or visit royalhomeimprovements.ca. Built on trust since 1969.
How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were?
That's how one Zoomer magazine greatly describes life, empowered. And with every issue, Zoomer celebrates that life, like the March-April issue with Gordon Lightfoot on the cover, photographed exclusively for Zoomer by Brian Adams. At 81, Lightfoot has a new album and 50 tour dates booked for this year. He reflects on his amazing career in a must-read, intimate profile, only in Zoomer magazine, on newsstands now. Zoomer magazine, life empowered.
Am I getting tax credits this year? You bet. It's nice to get credit for something you deserve. Not like when you're the middle child. They gave the family dog my name and no one noticed. I guess you don't need to dream of having superpowers when you're already invisible.
People are complicated. The experts at H&R Block make it simple to get the credit you deserve with more money back from tax credits available to those in Ontario. H&R Block. Get what's yours.
Corporations, governments, and sometimes entire civilizations. What goes up must come down. And it lands on The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio.
All right, welcome back. Len Kasten he's out there in on the internet somewhere, but we're not able, or he's not able to hear us, or we're not able to hear him, but we're trying to raise him. The author of Dark Fleet, Secret Nancy Space Program, and the Battle for the Solar System. And while Carlos is trying to raise Len, Len, if you do happen to be listening, just email me your phone number and we'll get you on that way. In the meantime, I guess we'll just open up the phone lines and take your questions and comments. Questions and comments. And let me give you those numbers. In the Greater Toronto Area, 416-360-0740. Again, in the GTA, Greater Toronto Area, 416-360-0740. 416-360-0740. And toll free from just about anywhere, 1-866-740-4740. 1-866-740-4740. All right. Now, let me also address or draw your attention to my podcast, Conspiracy Unlimited. Conspiracy Unlimited. And the podcast drops every Monday and Wednesday and Friday. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That's conspiracyunlimitedpodcast.com. Conspiracyunlimitedpodcast.com. And you can subscribe and begin listening right away. You know, I have produced over 370 episodes now, and we are closing in on 400,000 unique downloads every month. It's just growing by leaps and bounds. Very pleased with the response I'm getting from the podcast. Conspiracyunlimitedpodcast.com to listen and subscribe, and it's now available on Spotify. All right, so I don't know, do you want to talk coronavirus? I would love to hear how you're managing. How are you managing with the self-quarantining and the social distancing and so forth? How are people behaving in your neighborhood? How are people behaving in the grocery stores? I have to say, we have a couple of grocery stores that we shop at. One is called Food Basics, about 5 minutes from here. And the shelves are stocked reasonably well. Of course, there are some items that go missing pretty quickly. Toilet paper, paper towels. This has been talked about many, many times on social media. Why people decide to hoard toilet paper. I guess it's just kind of instinctual. I don't know. If you think that there's going to be some sort of breakdown in or disruption in delivery, you automatically assume that you're going to have to hoard certain items, batteries for flashlights, but toilet paper, I don't know. Anyway, at the Food Basics, people are behaving in a very orderly, polite fashion. And I noticed, though, that the cashiers at our Food Basics, they'll smile, they'll wave, but they won't talk. They won't talk. They won't engage in conversation. I guess they don't want to risk putting some particulates into the air or something like that. Anyway, if you'd like to talk about how people are behaving at the grocery store, how you're managing, what are you doing during this extended period of isolation, or let's call it self-quarantining. Let's see, who do we have here? We've got Al is on the line from Scarborough. Hey, Al, welcome to the Conspiracy Show. How are you doing?
Oh, you're welcome. I'm at home hibernating like everybody else.
You're hibernating. Do you have family there with you, or are you alone?
It's been settled in China, but I don't believe them, and I'm wondering if you have any insight into what's happening over there.
Right. So in China, and I'm hearing a lot of typing in the background, I'm not sure who that is, but in China, they're claiming no new cases, at least no new cases from local residents. So if people come into Wuhan or that province, and I believe there are about 60 million residents in that particular region. Wuhan is a city of about 11 million, and then the surrounding province is about 60 million. So think, let's say, twice the size of California in population. So I suspect they may be massaging the data a little bit, and they're telling us no new
I hear
cases.
you. I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Is that Len?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Len.
Well,
Welcome.
you got me. Okay. All right.
Let me just say hi to, or goodbye to Al in Scarborough, who called in. But thank you, Al, for that. And again, I don't think we're getting the full story from China. They're telling us that there are no new cases. I would, given their performance early on in this whole fiasco, I don't think that we can take them at face value. Let me put it that way. But let's hope that in China, like in South Korea, like in Taiwan, like in Singapore, we are seeing a drastic reduction in the number of cases, but they're taking extreme measures. And that's not where we're at here. I don't know if we're going to go that route, but we shall see. Al, thank you. We are delighted to have Len Kasten with us, the author of Dark Fleet, The Secret Nazi Space Program, and the Battle for the Solar System. Hey, Len, how are you?
Good, Richard. How are you?
My pleasure. I'm great. Thank you.
Okay.
So, but let me ask you, in all seriousness, I mean, we always open the show, how are you? But how are you? Seriously, what's going on?
I'm fine. I'm still living in Arizona, as you probably know.
Yes.
And it's going to be unbearably hot in about 1 month. And I'm going to try and find a way to get to Alaska at that point if I can. But for the moment, it's fine. Beautiful spring weather here.
Things will heat up in about a month. Do you? I mean, we have been told by some that might burn out the coronavirus.
Yes,
in which case, yeah. Well, then maybe you want to stay put.
Well, actually, yes, but it's still unbearable. Kerry Cassidy says that daylight does seem to burn up the virus, but if that's true, why isn't that burned up in Spain? Spain has a sort of a Mediterranean climate, and what about in Italy?
Well, it's not real warm there yet because we have a family and friends in neighboring Greece, and you will get some cool weather, some cold weather. It's just starting to come. It's just spring is just starting to arrive now in those areas. So, but we shall see. Okay, so hopefully in a month, maybe Arizona would be an excellent sort of case study to look at. Let's see what happens to the number of cases. But you're managing well, and you're doing okay.
Yes, I am doing quite well. One question I would like to raise with you, though.
Yes.
Have you looked at the statistics, the flu statistics for last year, 2019 to 2020? About 50,000 people died in the United States. Right now, the numbers are so much lower than that. I can't believe they would ever even approach 50,000 in this case.
Well, yeah, they're kind of projecting ahead and saying that if we don't do this, take these steps, then the numbers are going to continue to double and triple, and they're worried about it taking off kind of in an exponential way.
Yeah.
However, I'm just wondering whether the cure might be worse than the disease, because how much longer can this economy stand having businesses shuttered, people out of work? I mean, they're talking about maybe a couple of months. I don't think we can last that long. And I also worry about people deciding, you know what, I've had enough of this self-quarantining and social distancing. I've got to be with my family. I've got to go out with my friends. So we might get a little pushback in that area. It'll be.
I think we're getting it already. I think we're getting it already because the people in Florida are all on the beaches and they don't seem to care. They're all out on the beaches.
Well, let's hope the warm weather puts an end to this, or this malaria drug they're talking about. Let's hope it has some impact. So let's move on to this is a riveting book, Len. You're to be congratulated. It's very compelling, well documented. The Secret Nazi Space Program and the Battle for the Solar System. I wanted to jump in with a description of the Reptilians. who are they? How did they get here? Where did they come from?
Well, they came from their own home world in the constellation of Draco, but that was a long time ago. They were actually here before we were. As far as Stuart Swerdlow is concerned, they were here about 1 million years ago, and we came late. We came after that.
1 million. And did they live on the surface or did they live underground?
They lived on the surface. There were two continents that emerged from the water. One was Lemuria and one was Atlantis, and they inhabited Lemuria, and they lived there for a long time. They brought their dinosaurs with them, and they used them for a food source. But before they got here, they destroyed a planet on the way called Maldek, which was between Mars and Jupiter, and that was a human planet. And millions of humans died on that planet. Then when they went by Mars, they stripped the atmosphere off of Mars, and the human population on Mars had to go underground. So they did some damage on the way to getting to Earth. It wasn't that they just arrived here and took over Lemuria. And that was the situation for hundreds of thousands of years before we got here.
So it seems as if almost as in, and you mentioned, I think, Battlestar Galactica in the book, how that sort of mirrors our history. It seems as if then the reptilians have been pursuing humankind throughout the galaxy and other galaxies.
Yes, it does. In fact, they destroyed 50 million humans in the constellation Lyra. That was our first contact with the reptilians, was at Lyra. And they destroyed 3 planets and slaughtered 50 million humans who were very peaceful and didn't have much defense and didn't have much the ability to defend themselves at that point because they weren't expecting such an onslaught. And it was after that that the Federation, the Human Federation, was formed and scattered throughout the galaxy and started to fight back. They realized then what they were up against. And
how did they then decide that they were going to take over this planet? I mean, what was their aim or their MO? How do they intend to take over the planet, or how did they at that time?
Well, they're like pirates. They go throughout the galaxy and take over whatever they find that they would like to inhabit. They, according to Sverdlow, they now control 21 star systems in this neighborhood, and they are very, very developed in terms of weaponry and in terms of navigational abilities. So they can pretty much do whatever they want, and that's why it was so easy for them to destroy the civilization on Lyra, and then the one on Maldek. And that was the situation until the Federation decided to do something about it.
And talk to me about some of their abilities. They can shapeshift. They exist in at a sort of a different vibration rate, so they can sort of materialize or dematerialize. Talk to me about that.
Well, they inhabit the lower 4th dimension, which we know as the astral realm. That's basically their home territory. And you know that from the astral, they can materialize into the 3rd dimension anytime they want, and appear right in front of you. And they can also dress up in a human body. These are the so-called Illuminati. And when they're in a human body, they probably have about anywhere between 30 to 50% reptilian blood. That's what we used to call the blue bloods, the royalty.
Right.
And that they call them blue bloods because they had more copper in their blood, and they do have more copper in their blood system.
Interesting.
So
interesting.
That's the way it was until the Federation decided they were going to do something about it. By that time, the Federation was all over the galaxy. There were human colonies all over the galaxy. So we do have friends out there, but they can't do it for us. We have to do it ourselves.
And at what point did the reptilians sort of move underground?
Well, what happened was the Federation decided they were going to send a very fierce race of humans here to confront the reptilians. And they were not going to let them take over the solar system. They were called Atlans, Atlans, and they took over the continent that became known as Atlantis. And then the wars broke out immediately between the Atlans and the Reptilians. And the Atlans had very sophisticated weaponry. They loosened the foundations of Lemuria and caused it to sink under the Pacific. At that point, the Reptilians realized what lay ahead of them, and they decided to go underground. But that was not necessarily a handicap to them because they've lived underground on many other star systems. And they immediately created a very high-tech civilization underground, including high-speed rail systems, portals in and out into the galaxy. So it wasn't really a handicap for them. But we then possessed the surface after that, and that became the golden civilization that we called Atlantis, which was very, very highly developed.
Right. After Atlantis sank, and we sort of, pushed the reset button and had to sort of start over in terms of technology and so forth. Were the Reptilians then interacting with more primitive civilizations?
Initially, they were. Well, when they sank Atlantis, of course, the humans on this planet reverted back to more or less of a primitive civilization.
Right.
Because Atlantis was a golden civilization. They had extremely high technology. They had high spirituality. And when the continent went down, they were scattered throughout the planet. Most of them went to Egypt. That was the main colony, and a lot of them went to the Himalayan mountains and set up wisdom schools there. But basically, all that was left was a rather primitive civilization here. At that point, the Federation decided to call a convocation, and they created a meeting in the Andromeda constellation, and invited the Reptilians to that meeting, so that peace could be established here on this planet. At that point, it was agreed that a new human civilization would be created on this planet. And the deal was that they would have a reptilian brain. And the Reptilians agreed with that arrangement. And the arrangement was between the Elohim, which is also a human civilization in a distant star system, and the Reptilians. And I think the Reptilians thought, well, if they have the reptilian brain, they could control us. But the Elohim wanted to let that be. They thought it would be good for us to have that kind of basically a tough disposition, so we could defend ourselves. And the human race that we belong to was really created about 50,000 years ago, what we now call Homo sapiens sapiens. That's who we are.
Right. And were the Reptilians who were underground, were they occasionally coming up, abducting humans? Were they killing humans, eating humans?
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. We're a very tasty morsel to them. They drink human blood, they eat human flesh. So we're like cattle. We're like being kept like cattle in a cattle yard. And when they want some more food, they take us down there and they eat us. Just like in that movie, Time Machine. Exactly.
Right,
like
the Morlocks. The Morlocks.
Exactly. That's exactly the way we find ourselves.
That book was written in 1895. Did H.G. Wells know about this? Was this
he was
a thinly veiled?
Yes, absolutely. The Morlocks kind of looked like the Reptilians too, if you saw the movie. At least the way they were portrayed in Hollywood, anyway.
Yes. What did H.G. Wells know? I mean,
he knew
how
a
did
lot.
he know?
He knew a lot. He was. I would call him a self-described prophet. He wrote another story called The War in the Air. Have you heard of that book?
No.
This was before this was before we even invented the airplane. He described an air war between Germany and the rest of the world, and way ahead of anything that could have happened then. The Wright brothers hadn't even gotten their third plane in the air at that point. And here he was talking about German bombers that were coming to America, coming to us, and all of that. And he even described that the leader was a man who was very much like Hitler. So how did he know all this? He definitely had to have some prophetic abilities.
Right.
You can't just say he had a crystal ball. That's not enough.
No. Well, we'll get into this in a little bit. We'll circle back to it. But you're talking about, these advanced German aircraft in the late 19th century, early 20th century.
Exactly.
And there was a painter who was depicting what looked for all the world like the infamous Nazi bell. Charles Delchaux, I think his name was.
Oh, okay.
And there were not just one. It wasn't just one painting that looked somewhat like the Nazi bell. He painted the bell over and over and over again. And he was a member of something called the German Sonora Aero Club Collective. And again, we're talking about the 19th century. So the connection between, we'll come back to that, but the connection between the Reptilians and the Nazis, I mean, it is the subtitle, the secret Nazi space program. You're right that goes back to the 1920s. And a friend of Hitler's who was an occultist by the name of Dietrich Eckart. Tell me about Dietrich Eckart.
Well, Eckart was part of the Thule Society. I think you've heard of them probably, right?
Oh, yes.
They were into conjuring up demons and trying to get them to help them get what they wanted. Hitler became a disciple of Eckart, and he participated in these demonic sessions for 3 years. By the end of those 3 years, which was 1923, he was absolutely changed. Eckart believed he was the incarnation of the Antichrist, and that's why he took him under his wing. And if you want to talk about Nazi Germany, you have to talk about Dietrich Eckart, because what he said was, before he died, he said I have called the shots. He will succeed, but I have called the shots. So he took credit for it even then, just on his deathbed, for the creation of the Adolf Hitler that we know. And I think that's where it has to start. It has to start there.
Right. And so through Eckart, Hitler was able to communicate with the Reptilians.
Yeah, they thought they were demons. They didn't know they were aliens. That would have been much too far out of their purview to consider them as aliens at that point, because they didn't know that. They didn't know that they were not native to this planet. They just assumed that they were demons, and they were into demonology. They were very, very fervent demon seekers.
And they believed that the Hitler believed, and Eckart believed, that by forging an alliance with the Reptilians, that they could conquer the world. Is that the idea?
Yes, that was it. And the Reptilians wanted to use them because they knew that they could be very deadly, and they could do what they wanted to. But if you read the first 2 or 3 chapters in my book, you know that I talked about how they influenced humans and how they were able to do that. And I talked about the archons.
Yes.
That got complicated, I know, but I had to write those chapters.
Right. It does lay the groundwork, and I kind of decided to maybe kind of gloss over that because we only have the 2 hours, but people can read about that more in depth for themselves. Dark Fleet, the secret Nazi space program, and the battle for the solar system. Len Kasten, my guest, author of Alien World Order. And so do any of Eckart's writings remain? For example, do we know whether he writes about reptilians appearing before Hitler, meetings with reptilians, or were they simply channeling them?
They were channeling them. What he said on his deathbed was, "He will dance, but I have called the tune." That's what he said while he was dying. So he knew exactly what he had done because he had been in touch with the astral realm. He was able to channel them, and Hitler became very, very enamored of his relationship with Eckert. After his death, he built a stadium that then became attached to the Olympic Stadium in Nuremberg, and he dedicated it to Eckert. It became known as the Eckert Stadium. So they were very, very close. And basically, he was the one that created the whole link to the astral realm for Hitler. And he himself was a fervent anti-Semite. So a lot of Hitler's anti-Semitism could be really ascribed to him.
To Dietrich Eckert. All right, Len, we're going to take a time out. We'll come back. We'll talk about the German expedition to the Antarctic in 1938, the Schwabenland expedition, and we'll continue to delve into the secret Nazi space program. Len Kasten, my guest, right here on The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Serrett. Stay with us.
Exploring theories, uncovering facts, and offering a different view of the universe. This is The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett on Zoomer Radio. To speak with Richard live, call 416-360-0740 or toll free at 1-866-740-4740.
Over 50? It's time to take the at-home colon cancer test. Why? Because colon cancer is 90% curable when found early. Plus, testing is really easy. Just collect your sample and mail it in. We promise it's easier than you think. So ask your
Get clean and feel refreshed and support veterans all at the same time. I want to welcome a brand new sponsor to Conspiracy Unlimited, and I couldn't be more proud to be associated with the good people at Hero Soap. It's owned by veterans, and their products are outstanding. Their soaps contain no chemicals, dyes, or fragrances, and they come in these really cool resealable packages, so you can take your soap with you on the road instead of using those gross hotel soaps, or take it camping. I'm using the Peppermint Cool Soap, and the moment I started lathering up, I felt a cool, refreshing, and tingly wave wash over me. I felt more clean, more refreshed, more alive. And not only does my body feel refreshed, I feel good on the inside, knowing that the Hero Soap Company supports veterans. Sign up for the hassle-free monthly auto ship, and you'll never run out of quality natural soap again, and you'll save 10%. Plus, for every soap purchased through the subscription, one soap is sent to deployed troops around the world for free. If you want to get clean and feel refreshed and support veterans all at the same time, check out Hero Soap at herosoapcompany.com. herosoapcompany.com. Look for the banner ad at strangeplanet.ca/conspiracy show and in the episode notes for this podcast. Hero Soap. Let freedom clean.
Easy. Custom glazing and retractable solar screens. Custom windows, not just for your house, but for every room in your house. Magicwindow.ca. It's not really magic. It's just better, smarter thinking.
The world is being pulled over your eyes. This is The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio. To reach Richard, call 416-360-0740 or toll free at 1-866-740-4740.
Welcome back, Len Kasten, author of Alien World Order. He has a brand new one. It's called Dark Fleet, the secret Nazi space program and the battle for the solar system. So what's interesting is in Europe, 1938, the Germans have basically annexed Austria. They've moved on Czechoslovakia, and so they're really ramping things up. They're just a few months away from invading Poland, and in the midst of this, they launched this huge expedition to the Antarctic aboard this vessel, the Schwabenland. to Queen Maud Land in the Antarctic. What's happening with that, Len?
Well, that was a very elaborate mission. It was very carefully planned. It was very expensive, and they had top experts in just about every academic every academic field, including psychologists. They had people who were specialists in agriculture. They had planned. Before they left Germany, they had a complete plan for the settlement of the Antarctic. So they knew a lot about it, and the reason they knew a lot about it was because the reptilians were coaching them, and the reptilians were already there.
So they basically gave them the order: come to the Antarctic and set up a base here.
Not only a base, a spaceport. It was from the Antarctic that they intended to launch this. Well, there was an ancient city there already that was in ruins, and the reptilians more or less coached the Germans into taking over that city and building on. Showed me.
Ukrainian women, blonde blue of New Schwabenland at its height.
Well, according pretty high even at that point, which was only perhaps 50 years ago. Cold water channels from the Weddell Sea right to their landing place, so that they can disembark in rather a warm climate whenever they wanted to.
And
so, yeah.
Go ahead.
So that was all known. That information was all given to them by the reptilians, because they wanted to work with them together and go out into the solar system and into the galaxy.
Right. I mean, it's interesting that, again, we mentioned 38 in this expedition, but so, in the mid 40s, when they're in the midst of a war with Europe, it's almost as if they decided Europe is lost. Now we need to focus on Antarctic, right?
Well, I think they would have worked with Hitler more. They would have worked more with Hitler if they respected him and he hadn't tried to play general and go off on his own. And the reptilians abandoned him pretty much in 1943, and that's when he decided to build his house in Argentina. He had Bormann build him his house in Argentina.
All right, we'll take another time out, Len. We'll come back and continue to talk about New Schwabenland and the Nazis on the moon as early as, wait for this, 1942. Back with more of The Conspiracy Show. Stay with us. My name is Richard Serrett.
My Strange Planet shop is filled to the rafters and bursting with great gear. Check out the Toxic Mail and the Protect Our Power Grid t-shirts. My personal favorite right now, though, is my line of t-shirts celebrating carbon dioxide, the miracle molecule that makes life possible on our planet. But there's more than just t-shirts. There's mugs, phone cases, great hoodies and sweatshirts, tote bags, stickers, and more. The proceeds from the Strange Planet shop goes to support the work I do here. They help make this podcast, Conspiracy Unlimited, and my weekly radio program, The Conspiracy Show, all possible. So, get on up to my Strange Planet shop today. Just go to strangeplanet.ca. Remember, Christmas is coming. It's a strange planet. Get the gear.
At carp.ca/benefits. We're talking hundreds, even thousands of dollars of money you didn't know you had. So if you're not a member, what are you waiting for?
Hi, I'm Cherry Tab, co-founder of the Herzig Eye Institute. Our eyes play such an important role in the spread and prevention of COVID-19. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Wash your hands often, and be vigilant about cleaning door handles and other surfaces that are touched frequently. If you wear contact lenses, consider wearing your glasses. Your health is what matters most to us. Google High Definition Vision and sign up for my blog so we can stay connected. Look after yourself. Promise me.
Most investors over 55 fear running out of money in
This is no place for the naive or the faint-hearted. The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio.
All right, welcome back. Len Kasten stays with us. Dark Fleet, the secret Nazi space program and the battle for the solar system. Before we proceed, Len, how do people get a copy of the book?
The book is available on Amazon or from the publisher, Inner Traditions, also at most bookstores.
Now,
especially Barnes & Noble. There aren't too many other bookstores left anymore. So
That's true. Okay. So you mentioned that at a certain point, the reptilians sort of severed their relationship with Hitler. Why was that?
Well, they realized he was trying to play general, and the invasion of Russia was crazy. It was just they were slaughtered there, and we were supplying Russia with tanks and armaments from Murmansk, way up north. So what the Germans were losing, they couldn't replace, whereas the Russians could replace it because we were helping them. And the reptilians realized that Hitler could not play general. He just wasn't a general. He was basically unbalanced, and they came to understand that, and so they abandoned him in 1930, in 1943.
And so then who essentially from the Third Reich, who took over, I guess, as sort of the main go-between between the Nazis and the reptilians?
Well, the scientists and the businessmen in Germany none of them really liked Hitler at all, and they didn't respect him, so they were happy to get him out of the way. And sending him to Argentina was fine with them. They went to Antarctica, and the scientific community in Germany was very advanced at that point, and they didn't really want to have anything to do with Hitler anymore. They knew he was basically crazy. His voyages into the astral realm were making him crazy and unbalanced, and he was not really a very effective leader, especially to the scientists who. That's basically why they tried to kill him. That was the reason. He wasn't doing anything anymore.
All right. So at this point, the Third Reich is more focused again on the base in Antarctic, in New Schwabenland, New Berlin, moving their base of operation.
Richard, don't forget
Yes.
that the Schwabenland voyage was in 1938.
Right.
And Germany invaded Poland in 1939. So this
That's right.
was all a year before they were ready to start World War II, which makes it amazing, really.
Right.
They would cross 6,000 miles across the Atlantic to a frozen wasteland they didn't really know anything about a year before they were ready to attack Poland.
Right. Yeah. It almost makes no sense because you would think that they would be pouring all of their resources into a war in Europe, which they intended on, they intended on setting Europe ablaze. So you would think that they would have focused 100% of their resources on that. However, so as the war in Europe is winding down, they decide to move their base of operation to South America, Antarctic, and basically their plan, their focus now is to take over America, to infiltrate and take over America. So Operation Paperclip, this plan to get Nazi scientists out of Germany before the Soviets could get their hands on them.
Right.
The Werner von Brauns and the Hans Kammlers and so forth, and the Dornbergers, all of these people that escaped the hangman's noose in Nuremberg. It almost as if it was going according to the Nazis' plan. They were looking. It was like a Trojan horse, right?
More or less, that's right. Yeah, the German scientists took over really the whole operation. They were just very happy to get rid of Hitler and let him go off to Argentina and spend all of his ill-gotten gains that he had stolen from the rest of Europe. They didn't care anymore. He was no longer their leader. And after the assassination attempt failed and he started assassinating thousands of others, hanging them by wires, they realized that they could no longer deal with that man.
So, but how did the Nazis? They lucked out because the Americans wanted as I say, to exfiltrate as many of these scientists, the rocket scientists and so forth, and also the intelligence officers and who would join the OSS, later the CIA. How did they fall into that trap? Because the Nazis, they wanted a way to infiltrate the United States, and yet the Americans provided the means through Operation Paperclip. How did that happen?
That was the plan from the beginning. That's the reason they invaded Russia and not America. They could have sent a fleet over here and invaded America if they'd wanted to. They had the means to do that, but they wanted to keep America intact so that they could take it over, because the American businessmen, a lot of the American businessmen, Henry Ford, many others, were inclined to the Nazi philosophy. And they had two very important people in control. Allen Dulles and his brother, John Foster Dulles, were more or less running the government. And Eisenhower was very naive when it came to politics, and he did what they told him to do. And Allen Dulles was a known Nazi sympathizer. So that's how they did it.
Okay, now I just want to back up here a moment. We're approaching the top of the hour, and at that time we'll open up the phone lines and we'll take questions, comments, and we'll continue to delve into this. But I wanted to back up to the development of some of the advanced aircraft, spacecraft, and talk about SS General Hans Kammler, for example, Werner von Braun, and the development of something called the Nazi Bell. And I alluded to that earlier, how that was being depicted in paintings going back to the 19th century. But can we talk about the Nazi Bell for a little bit?
Yeah, we could do that. I'll give you my opinion about it. I don't know too much about it, but I'll tell you what I think is the case with that. I think that was a teleportation device. That was for going through teleporting people. It really was not a physical aircraft. That's my opinion about that. And I think a few of the authors that I've talked to also agree with that.
A teleportation device.
Yeah, because it was really developed in the 1920s, before Hitler came to power.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've read about something called Serum 525, which was supposed to be, I guess, I'm not sure if that's what it was powered on. They also talked about this strange effect zone around the Nazi Bell, where there'd be very strange effects if you were anywhere between, let's say, 500 and 650 feet. So as a teleportation device, and you say it was developed in the 1920s, this technology that would have come through channeling the reptilians?
Well, there was a group of women in Germany then called the Vril women, who were all mediums. They were all mediums, and they were in touch with a planet in the solar system, with the Aldebaran star system. The Aldebaran star system was very similar. The people, or the people there, were very much like the Germans in a lot of ways. In fact, the language spoken there was sort of a Germanic language. And these women, the Vril women, all they wanted to do was get back there because they considered that their home. And so they were channeling all this scientific information to help build that device. And this was in the 1920s. This was before Hitler came to power. And basically, they eventually were successful. And they were able to basically go through that teleportation channel or portal and leave Germany completely. That's all they really wanted. They were never really Nazi sympathizers. They had nothing to do with Hitler, really. And I think the bell, that was what the bell was, and that the skeleton of that particular device still remains, right? Isn't that still intact?
I don't know. It was supposedly housed in some facility. They called it the Giant near the Wenceslas mines near the Czech border. And I know that there was an SS officer at the Nuremberg trial. He was like an Obergruppenführer, Jacob Sporenberg, and he admitted during the trial that he had killed something like 60 German engineers, scientists, and technicians because he had to prevent them from disclosing the details of this technology. So we have a reference apparently to this technology at the Nuremberg trials from the Sporenberg character.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that. Yeah.
But what? And then I also mentioned that earlier that Charles Delschau. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. It's Dellschau. Charles Delschau, and he was a 19th century artist, and he was. You can find his drawings and paintings online, and he was drawing something that looked all the world like the Nazi bell. And again, this is in the late 19th century, which kind of, you mentioned H.G. Wells, this prophet talking about this German engineering and aircraft before the Wright brothers, even in 1902.
Wasn't there a connection with the Nazi bell and the Aztec so-called crash? Which was really not a crash; it was really a landing. Do you know anything about the Aztec crash?
Yes, I do. Yes, I've the shows on the Aztec crash in New Mexico, but I didn't know about a possible Nazi bell connection.
There was a connection. I just read about it. I did not really look into it in great detail, but I found from some other people that there was a connection.
Okay, we're just about a minute and a half before the top of the hour here. Let's just start talking about the Nazis on the moon 27 years before Apollo 11, and then we'll continue after the break. So how did this was a craft launched from the Antarctic, New Schwabenland, I'm guessing?
Yes, exactly. That was their spaceport, and that's where it was launched from. 1942. They had the so-called the spacecraft they had developed was the so-called Haunebu, and the Haunebu 3, or the Haunebu 2 really, was what they used. Vladimir Terziski, have you heard of him?
No.
He was a very advanced Bulgarian scientist, and he's the one that claimed that moon landing, I don't know where he got his information, but he got it from somewhere he claimed was very reliable. And he says that the first man on the moon was a Nazi officer by the name of can't think of his name right now. And that was it. That was the first landing on the moon, 1942. And after that, they started burrowing under the surface and building their colony there.
All right, Len, we'll take a time out. Top of the hour, come back and discuss further. Dark Fleet, the secret Nazi space program. Len Kasten, my guest, right here on The Conspiracy Show. Stay with us.
If you want to support my work here at Strange Planet, please consider becoming an official donor. It's easy. Just go to patreon.com/Strange Planet. There are several donation tiers to choose from $1 per month to $50 a month. For the month of December, new donors at the $10, $20, and $50 per month tier receive a free mug from my Strange Planet shop. Donors in the $20 tier also have their names appear on a crawl during the YouTube live stream of my weekly radio program, The Conspiracy Show. And donors in the $50 tier receive a special on-air thank you on my radio program. Whatever you give, your support helps keep my radio program and this podcast going.
Live from Toronto, Canada, Earth, The Conspiracy Show with Richard Sarrett on Zoomer Radio.
Thanks for inviting me into your home, long-haul truck, RV, camper, taxi, your parents' well-appointed rec room with the simulated wood paneling, electric fireplace, and the painting of dogs playing poker, your loft, that greasy spoon just off the interstate, and your cabin in the woods. Hello to everyone listening in on our flagship station, AM 740 and 96.7 FM, Zoomer Radio here in Toronto. And hiya to those of you tuning in on one of our fine affiliate stations across North America. Hey you, streaming us at zoomerradio.ca and on our YouTube channel, Strange Planet. And of course, howdy to all of you who've gathered in the live YouTube chat. Wherever and however you're listening, I bid thee the warmest of welcomes, and I thank you for your fine company. Len Kasten, the author of Dark Fleet, the Secret Nazi Space Program, and the battle for the solar system, stays with us this hour. And we've been talking about the Nazi-Reptilian alliance that took place before the Second World War, how this alliance infiltrated the U.S. military-industrial complex, or at least we'll get into that a little bit more. And we'll continue to talk this hour about anti-gravity propulsion technology, alien techniques of mass mind control, hyperdimensional teleportation capabilities, and we'll also open up the phone lines this hour for questions and comments. In the Greater Toronto Area, call 416-360-0740, 416-360-0740, and toll free from anywhere, 1-866-740-4740, 1-866-740-4740. Len Kasten is a UFO researcher, freelance writer, a former member of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena and the Mutual UFO Network, and he's the author of The Secret History of Extraterrestrials, Secret Journey to Planet Serpo, Alien World Order, and again, the new one, Dark Fleet. Before the break, we were talking about the Nazis using the spaceport in Neuschwabensland in the Antarctic, and they from there launched a lunar landing in 1942. That seems almost unbelievable. I mean, do you believe that, Len? Are you satisfied that the evidence is there that they landed in 42?
Yes, I am. Let me read to you what I said about Trzynski. The Methi rocket craft was built in diameters of 15 and 50 meters, and the Shriver-Walter turbine-powered craft was designed as an interplanetary exploration vehicle. That was the claim made by Vladimir Trzynski, who was a scientist. He claims it was this technology that achieved the moon landing as early as 1942. He says first landing on the moon by the Germans was at Mare Imbrium on August 23, 1942, using a Methi rocket. The first man on the moon was Captain Lieutenant Werner Feisenberg of the Kriegsmarine. That's what Trzynski has to say about that. And he's a very reliable scientist, Trzynski, and he knows a lot.
And one would imagine that if they were tunneling under the lunar surface and creating an underground base, that they were using the same type of slave labor that they used here on Earth in Germany, Poland, and elsewhere. Is that a fair assessment? Were they using slave labor?
Well, yeah, that would be a fair assessment, except in those early days, they were not able to send large numbers of slaves to the lunar surface. After a while, many trips later, using the Haunebu 3, they were able to send in large groups of slaves, and of course, they had 36,000 slaves in Antarctica. They had Himmler had already moved them there in those huge submarines. What he called the milk cow submarines that could travel the entire distance of the Atlantic underwater. So there were plenty of slaves in Antarctica, and I would assume then once they started making frequent trips to the moon, they were sending the slaves there. Absolutely.
What can you tell us about the Haunebu 3? Do we have any physical descriptions of this craft?
In my book, I have a picture of one. There were so many pictures of the Haunebu online. If you put that into Google, you'll get all kinds of pictures of them, including the exact dimensions, everything. It's all out there.
Right. Yeah, you have some fantastic illustrations in the book, and I'm just flipping through it now to see if I can find the Haunebu 3.
Now don't forget, Hanabu did not require a very sophisticated launch facility because it was anti-gravity. So it just rise up into the air and go. And that's the reason it was so easy for them.
Right,
They were not using rockets.
And this is all technology. Now, at this point in the underground base in New Schwabenland, are the Nazis working directly with the reptilians? Are they working side by side with them at this point?
They are, side by side, absolutely. And that's how the Dark Fleet came to be. It was really the reptilians helped them put that together and create a Dark Fleet base on the moon. And they actually joined in with the reptilians in conquest of other planets in the solar system and outside in the galaxy. They actually work together.
I'm just holding up a picture of the.
That's why the Dark Fleet had such advanced technology.
I'm just holding up a picture for those on the YouTube live stream. I'm holding up a picture from the book. It's called Alpha, Lujan Archivos Ovni, the German moon base. I'm just holding up a picture of that. That's in Len's book right there. I don't know if you can see that on the live YouTube stream. And then from the moon in 42, a landing on Mars in 45. Do I have the date correct?
Yes, 45 was the first landing on Mars by the Germans. Our first landing on Mars was 1962. So they were way ahead of us.
And the Mars landing, did they take off from Mars, or was that also from Schwabensland, New Schwabensland?
Well, at that point the moon colony was well developed, so they had the moon colony in place, and they had New Schwabenland in place, and they had Argentina. They had all three places that they were using as a base, but mainly the main launch facility was Antarctica, what they called Base 211. That was their main intergalactic and solar system launch facility.
Right. Okay. So at the end of the war, this SS general Hans Kammler, who had sort of taken over the V2 rocket program. Hans Kammler was basically Werner von Braun's boss at this point, I guess. He mysteriously disappears. It's claimed that he had committed suicide. Although we find out that he was in the custody of the U.S. Army at some point. So, what is Kammler or Hans Kammler's role in New Schwabensland? Does he end up there, or is he exfiltrated to the U.S.?
No, he never came to the U.S. and he was never put under the U.S. Army. When Patton's army got to Czechoslovakia, he was gone, and there were many rumors that he had committed suicide. There were four rumors circulating that he had committed suicide, but by that time he was already in New Schwabenland, and he was the one that put together the anti-gravity disc fleet in Antarctica.
The anti-gravity disc fleet.
Because by that time he had a lot of experience with it.
Okay, and so Werner von Braun, of course, comes to the United States, and by 1960, he's director of the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, which is the central facility of NASA. I mean,
that's right.
I think we all need to let that sink in. Here we have, he was SS, Werner von Braun, right? He was a Nazi SS. Nazi SS officer.
That's right.
How many thousands of people in London died because of him? Thousands and thousands. And here he is now being hailed as a hero in the United States and running the Marshall Space Flight Center. That's
right.
When you stop and think about it, it's unimaginable.
It is unimaginable. And he was a Nazi. Because by that time, by 1960, the Germans were in control of all of the aerospace technology at Base 211 and elsewhere. And they were running the show. And don't forget that Allen Dulles was a known Nazi sympathizer, and he was the head of the CIA. And his brother, John Foster Dulles, was the head Secretary of State.
Right.
And Eisenhower was very naive in terms of politics, so he did what they told him to do. And that's how they got von Braun in as head of spaceflight. But now think about this for a moment, though. Just think about this for a moment. At that point in 1960, the German colony on Mars and on the moon was well developed. The last thing that the Germans wanted was for the Americans to get there. Okay? So naturally, with Werner von Braun in charge, he put the brakes on it, and Kennedy pushed him, though, and they did have the moon landing, but that was as far as he would let it go. Basically, his job, von Braun's job, was to keep us away from the colonies on the moon and Mars, and he did it very well.
That's interesting. His job was not to build up NASA. His job was to prevent the Americans from getting to the moon.
That's exactly the case. They had it all worked out. They were way ahead of everybody else. And von Braun was still very much a Nazi, believe it or not.
Oh, I have no doubt about that. At what point did the Americans catch wind of well, we need to back up actually to 1947, because the Americans are, along with the British and the Australians, they send forces to the Antarctic to battle the Nazis in Operation High Jump.
That's right. We sent a fleet of 13 ships, including an aircraft carrier, a whole brigade of Marines to destroy the Nazi base because we knew it was there. And guess what? Hans Kammler by that time had perfected the flying discs. They came out of the water. They sank one of the ships. 68 Marines were killed, and Admiral Byrd had no choice but to turn around and go home. That was the first real defeat of the American Navy.
Right. Despite the German army surrendering in 1945, 1944, I guess the war ended in Europe. 1944, no, 45. Sorry,
45. 45. Yeah.
Right.
And then April 45.
And then August 45 for the Japanese. But incidentally, were the Japanese involved? Were they also involved in this Nazi-Reptilian alliance?
They were involved with the Nazis. I'm not so sure whether the Reptilians had a direct connection with them or not. But German technology was shipped to Japan. A lot of advanced German technology was shipped to Japan, and including uranium. That's a whole other story. The Nazis were the Japanese were very close to an atom bomb themselves at that point, and so were the Nazis.
Right. So 1947, after Operation High Jump, now all of a sudden we have the Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting. We have Roswell. You mentioned the Aztec UFO incident, I guess about a year later in New Mexico, 1948. You have all of these UFO incursions. So what are we talking about here? Advanced German spacecraft, antigravitics, right?
Let's not forget the 1952 flyover of Washington, D.C.
Yes.
They just brazenly flew right over Washington. A whole fleet of German flying saucers, and they were photographed too. They were just saying, "Look," what they were basically saying was, "Hey, this is what we have. You want to mess with us now?" That message came through loud and clear.
And so the 47 Roswell crash, that was a German craft.
No, that was not a German. No, that was from Serpo. That was from the star system there. That was an alien race that crashed at Roswell. Actually, it was not a crash. It was the two of their craft collided over Roswell because of the radar. And it was also a very, very, very powerful lightning storm going on. So it screwed up everything. And that's why it crashed. But one alien did survive. And that was a very important survival.
And why?
Because we took him to Los Alamos, and he stayed alive for another 5 years and told us a lot of things. And basically, he set up the exchange program. That happened in 1962. He was the one, because the craft that he was on that crashed at Roswell had a communications device on it. And it was under his advice that they went and retrieved the communications device, the scientists at Los Alamos, and were able to use it. They were actually able to use it to communicate with his home planet. And that allowed him to send 6 messages to his home planet using that device. And that's when it was agreed to, that's when the exchange program was agreed to. But the stipulation was that they would only agree to it 10 years into the future. So they didn't want to do it until 1962. And by that time, Kennedy was president.
Okay. Let's circle back then to the Nazi craft. What about the Aztec UFO incident? We mentioned that earlier. Was that a German craft, do you suspect?
Unfortunately, I don't know very much about the Aztec craft. I just know that others have considered it not really a crash, but a landing. I do know a lot about the Kingman crash because that was very important. And,
all right, tell us about that.
Well, the Kingman crash was not a crash either. It was a landing. And that arrangement was made between the aliens and our people at Los Alamos, that they would send a craft back here for us to reverse engineer. By that time, we had more or less established a diplomatic relationship with the aliens, and they agreed to send a craft that we could use to reverse engineer, and that's the one that landed at Kingman. And it was taken away on a tank trailer across the river and up into Los Alamos. I'm sorry, no, Area 51, I'm sorry. Went to Area 51.
Okay, so the after Operation High Jump in 47, at what point did the Americans figure out that the Nazis also have a base on the moon?
Well, you have to remember one thing, Richard, that when you say the Americans, who are you speaking of? The military?
U.S. government, the military, either or?
But remember that the 2 Dulles brothers were more or less in charge of everything, and they were Nazi sympathizers. So what happened by that time is the American scientists and the American aerospace engineers were now working together with the Nazi engineers at Antarctica. Antarctica became an international scientific base, much like Silicon Valley. The Americans and Germans were cooperating actively. A lot of the American aerospace companies were involved with the German companies. Read, if you want to learn out more about that, then read Michael Sala's books because he covers that in great detail. So by that time, the American military had become Germanized. We knew about their bases on the moon and Mars. We knew they were way ahead of us. They were keeping us dumb and dumber. And when they wanted somebody to eat, they would go underground and they would go get them and send them put underground, just like in the time machine. So we were working actively with the Nazis at that point. America had become Nazified, become Germanized.
So the NASA was set up as window dressing for public consumption.
Exactly.
To
and
pretend
Werner von Braun
like
was in charge. That's right. So here they had Werner von Braun in charge of NASA. They had Kammler in Antarctica. They were everywhere. And
right.
And it was
Fritz Kramer in the Pentagon,
right,
Galen
exactly.
Reinhardt in the Reinhard Galen in the OSS.
Exactly. They were all over our military. They were all over our systems, advanced companies in Antarctica, and also in Argentina. So at that time, America had become under the control of Nazi Germany at that point. But it was no longer Nazi Germany; it was Nazi Antarctica. And by that time, they had developed a very, 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 very advanced scientific facility on Mars and the Moon.
All right, Len, we are approaching a break. We'll take a timeout, come back, and hopefully get to some phone calls. Dark Fleet, the secret Nazi space program, and the battle for the solar system, right here on The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Serrett. Stay with us.
I want to welcome a brand new sponsor to Conspiracy Unlimited, and I couldn't be more proud to be associated with the good people at Hero Soap. It's owned by veterans, and their products are outstanding. Their soaps contain no chemicals, dyes, or fragrances, and they come in these really cool resealable packages, so you can take your soap with you on the road instead of using those gross hotel soaps, or take it camping. I'm using the Peppermint Cool Soap, and the moment I started lathering up, I felt a cool, refreshing, and tingly wave wash over me. I felt more clean, more refreshed, more alive. And not only does my body feel refreshed, I feel good on the inside, knowing that the Hero Soap Company supports veterans. Sign up for the hassle-free monthly auto ship, and you'll never run out of quality natural soap again, and you'll save 10%. Plus, for every soap purchased through the subscription, one soap is sent to deployed troops around the world for free. If you want to get clean and feel refreshed and support veterans all at the same time, check out Hero Soap at herosoapcompany.com. herosoapcompany.com. Look for the banner ad at strangeplanet.ca/conspiracy show and in the episode notes for this podcast. Hero Soap. Let freedom clean.
In your body are your eye muscles? Make eye care your New Year's resolution with Pearl Vision. They're offering 40% off lenses with frame purchase and carry brands your family loves like Ray-Ban and Coach. Plus, Pearl Vision direct bills most insurance plans and welcomes your current prescription. Arrange your family's eye exams at pearlvision.ca. Valid prescription required. Valid at participating Canadian locations. Taxes extra. Some restrictions may apply. See store for details. Offer ends 3/31/2020. Eye exams available by the independent doctors of optometry located at or next to Pearl Vision.
Open the windows, let in the fresh air of spring. Pollock's Carpet Market says there's no better time of year to install new hardwood flooring.
Pollock's Carpet Market?
Yeah, also all the top quality loose lay and clicking vinyl plank floors, all waterproof. Pollock's Carpet Market is one of the best places to get a great floor at great prices and more than just carpets. Pollock's Carpet Market on Roncesvalles Avenue.
I'm definitely going.
Smart choice. Pollock's really is the best place for all your flooring needs, and they install everything they sell.
Pollock's Carpet Market.
Corporations, governments, and sometimes entire civilizations. What goes up must come down. And it lands on The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio.
We are back with Len Kasten, author of Dark Fleet, the Secret Nazi Space Program and the Battle for the Solar System. The question that occurs to me is, why would the reptilians want Earthlings, humans, out in space?
Well, they knew that they could control the Nazis completely, and they had the technology, and that they would be obedient little good boys and do whatever they wanted them to. And their ultimate goal was control of the human race, of course, and the Nazis were humans. And yet they were very, very congenial and very obedient to what the reptilians wanted. Plus, they could always bring them food and blood, when they wanted it. So it worked out well. It was a marriage. In my book, I said it was a marriage made in hell.
Right, indeed. So the meeting, two of them. There's the meeting that Eisenhower supposedly had at Edwards Air Force Base, I think in '54, and then in 1955 at Holloman Air Force Base near Alamogordo, New Mexico, where he's reported to have met with aliens. How do those two meetings figure into this, if at all?
Well, Eisenhower, having been a military man himself, was very aware of the fact that the American military had now been taken over by the Germans. He knew that, and it wasn't really a German military so much as it was a mixed military. They called it the Cabal, and he realized that, and that's why that speech he made in 1960, he was trying to tell us that and warn us about that. That speech that he gave in 1960, just before Kennedy took over, was considered more or less Eisenhower trying to let us know what had happened, but he couldn't say it directly. and he had to use very careful language. But basically what he was saying was that the American military was no longer really American, that the Nazis had taken it over.
Right. So in those face-to-face meetings with aliens, and by some accounts they were Greys. I believe the one of them was with Greys, and one of them, the meetings was with Nordics. So are these members of the Federation, or were the Greys aligned with the Reptilians? Explain that.
The Reptilians created the Greys. They were part biological. They were part electronic. They were like a little slave guys. They did exactly what the Reptilians told them to do. So they couldn't even reproduce. They had to clone. They had to clone each other. The Reptilians were totally in charge of the Greys. And they basically did all the dirty work.
So what was the purpose of that meeting, if it happened?
Well, I think that it was an agreement in 1955 that we would let them kidnap or abduct humans on a very limited basis, and of course they took advantage of it and broke the agreement immediately, and started abducting thousands of people. And Eisenhower said yes to that. He realized later, though, just before he left office, that what he had done was wrong. That the Nordics, the Pleiadians, who wanted to help us initially, had a stipulation that they would help us if we gave up our nuclear weapons. And when Eisenhower discussed that with his generals, they said, "No way, we're not going to do that." So he had to turn them down. But the Greys had no such stipulation. So it seemed like a good deal.
I'm wondering then, in light of that, the whole Cold War, and the tension and the buildup of nuclear arms, and here we have Nazi officials in the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. We have Nazis in the Pentagon. It has been speculated that Fritz Kramer, a Nazi general who ended up in the Pentagon, was the one that ordered President Reagan to visit the Bitburg, the cemetery, the Waffen-SS cemetery in Bitburg, which caused quite a stir.
Oh yeah, I remember hearing that. Yep, I know. I didn't know it was Kramer. I didn't know it was Kramer, though.
Well, that's one of the rumors. I don't know if Kramer was even alive at that point. This was in the early 1980s.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
possible. But I'm wondering then, was the Cold War created in order to, distract, keep the Americans or the Eisenhower from making a deal with the Nordics, because they said you've got to give up your nuclear weapons and then we'll help you, but you can't give up your nuclear weapons if you're in the midst of an arms race with the Soviets.
Well, you have to remember that the Nazis, right from the beginning, right from the 40s, were fanatically anti-Bolshevist and anti-Russian. So they were the ones who basically wanted us to destroy the Russian technology. It was their desire to do that. It wasn't ours, really. And they were in control by that time. They were in control of our military. What we call it the Cabal, CABAL, was a combined American-German operation.
So when Kennedy announced that he pledged to put a man on the moon within the decade, in that famous speech, we do it not because it's easy, but because it is hard. That must have obviously upset the Wernher von Brauns and the Dulles.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. And so a lot of people think that we never really did go to the moon. I happen to think we did. But von Braun had no choice but to let it happen. But you can be sure that the last thing the Nazis wanted was the American military presence on their colonies on the moon and Mars. So naturally, they did what they had to do because they were in control here. They could do it. They had von Braun, they had Kammler, they had all the power and all the money that they needed to take control, and they did. Now, Eisenhower couldn't prevent it. There was no way he could prevent it. He tried, but he couldn't.
Sorry, Eisenhower couldn't prevent what?
The takeover. It was basically a German takeover.
Right. And so when Kennedy ordered, NASA to start working on putting a man on the moon, and you're saying that Wernher von Braun at that point had no choice to go along, no choice but to go along with this order. Was that then the reason for Kennedy's assassination?
I think it was, yes. I think it was. Kennedy naturally wanted an American presence on the moon and Mars, and that's the last thing the Germans wanted. They didn't want Americans there. So Kennedy was determined, and I think that's why he was killed.
And then, so likewise, LBJ, he also wanted it. It seems that if they had killed Kennedy, couldn't they have just shut down the program?
More or less they did, because President Kennedy was fanatic about it, whereas
Johnson
was really not that keen about it. And I'm not saying that Johnson was basically influenced by the Nazis, but he had no choice either, just like Eisenhower did. They had too much power and too much technology, too much of an advantage. That's why we never got anti-gravity craft. That's why we never got free energy. They had it on the moon. They had it on Mars. They weren't going to give it to us, though.
And so by this point, in the 1960s, we had Project Blue Book and so forth, and all of these famous UFO incidents. Are the majority of these then German craft?
I think the one that appeared to Billy Meyer in Switzerland was. I think that she was, Semyasi was German. And that particular craft, I think, was German. I'm not sure about Van Tassel and the others, whether they were German or not. They could have been. They did look German. They certainly did look fair-haired, blue-eyed. So, I don't know.
What about the Biddy and Barney Hill abduction?
Well, you do recall, I think, when you read about that abduction, right?
Yes. They mentioned.
Did
they mention a Nazi on board?
That's right. Betty Hill said there was a Nazi on board. So there's that connection right there, working with the Greys.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Let's see. We've just got about a minute here. We'll on the other side. We've got some calls starting to line up, and we'll get to those. We'll also talk about the Apollo 11 program and what did Neil Armstrong see on the moon, and what did he say? We'll give you some excerpts from a conversation he had with the NASA communication director that'll blow your socks off. Len Kasten, the author of Dark Fleet, the secret Nazi space program, and the battle for the solar system, right here on The Conspiracy Show. Stay with us.
My Strange Planet shop is filled to the rafters and bursting with great gear. Check out the Toxic Mail and the Protect Our Power Grid t-shirts. My personal favorite right now, though, is my line of t-shirts celebrating carbon dioxide, the miracle molecule that makes life possible on our planet. But there's more than just t-shirts. There's mugs, phone cases, great hoodies and sweatshirts, tote bags, stickers, and more. The proceeds from the Strange Planet shop goes to support the work I do here. They help make this podcast, Conspiracy Unlimited, and my weekly radio program, The Conspiracy Show, all possible. So, get on up to my Strange Planet shop today. Just go to strangeplanet.ca. Remember, Christmas is coming. It's a strange planet. Get the gear.
Should a recession strike the world economy, will you be a slave to it? Or will you know the right trading strategies to take advantage? Saturday and Sunday on Zoomer Radio, join the Online Trading Academy. Get access to the same markets as the pros. Learn how they do it, and how you can profit from direct online trading. Listen to Trading and Investing weekend mornings at 7:30 on Zoomer Radio. Register now for a free introductory trading and investing class. Visit torontoclass.com or call 888-670-TRADE.
Hi, I'm Cherry Tab, co-founder of the Herzig Eye Institute. We're taking every possible precaution to keep you safe. That's why the Herzig Eye Institute is pausing elective surgery for the time being. However, we remain available online and by phone to keep you fully informed about our refractive cataract and laser vision correction services, and to schedule and reschedule your Herzig appointments. Google high definition vision and sign up for my blog so we can stay connected. Look after yourself. Promise me.
We'll do more than help you pack and move, more than unpack and get you set up in your new home. We'll teach you a simpler, more functional way to live. If you're downsizing and facing the chaos of clutter, turn to the next step forward for our expertise and compassion in transitioning. We'll help you throw away the things and hold on to the memories. Get with you, but you can take the next step forward at thenextstepforward.ca.
You want the truth? You can handle the truth. The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio. To get the truth, call Richard now at 416-360-0740 or toll free at 1-866-740-4740.
We're back with Len Kasten, and we have Paul in Oshawa on the line. Paul, welcome to the Conspiracy Show.
Thank you very much for taking the call. And Ken, such a fascinating topic in today's world.
All right.
My question to you, Ken, is that with the reptilians running the show on this planet, have you heard of any adversary to the reptilians, such as the insectoid like the praying mantis, of many reports of that, or another species that is with the reptilians or against that? Maybe a new kid on the block is coming to our planet?
Well, there is a group of reptilian-like creatures on Mars. There were two indigenous populations on Mars when the Nazis got there. One was insectoid and one was reptoid. The reptoids were actual enemies of the reptilians themselves, and they've had battles between the two, and the reptoids usually come out on top. So the Nazis had to get rid of both of those indigenous populations on Mars before they could create their colonies, and they did. They did because they actually used nuclear weapons there. I know that sounds far-fetched, but that seems to be the case. They had to use nuclear weapons to get rid of some of the aliens that were already on Mars when they got there.
Is that how Mars lost its atmosphere?
No, the Martian atmosphere was stripped away when the reptilian spaceship or planet, whatever you want to call it, went by Mars when they first arrived here, and the Martians had to take refuge under the surface because the atmosphere became too thin to breathe. But that was also done by the reptilians. That was the fault of the reptilians.
All right. Thank you for the call, Paul in Oshawa. Now we have Gary. Gary, welcome to the Conspiracy Show.
Hello, Richard. Thanks for taking my call.
Where are you calling from, Gary?
I'm calling from Brantford.
Ah.
I'm a voice out of your past, Richard.
Oh, yes. Good to hear from you again. My old grade 8 teacher. My grade 8 teacher.
Correct. I just
Wonderful.
want to congratulate you and compliment you on your vast range of knowledge of many, many subjects. And your brain is certainly working well in order to keep those things in order.
Well, you had a little something to do with that, I must say.
Well, that humbles me. But anyway, I would like to ask you and your guest about the swimmers, the Lake Baikal swimmers of 1982. Were they reptilians here on Earth, or is there doesn't seem to be a lot of of write-up about them, and I just wondered if you knew anything about them.
Just repeat that. What were they called again? The Lake Baikal swimmers?
Lake Baikal swimmers. They were discovered by some Russian divers that were diving down at about 150 feet, and they encountered these 9-foot creatures that seemed to be able to maneuver around in the water, and when they tried to capture one of them, they were rushed to the surface by some force, and 3 of them died from the bends. And the other one said that they were too shaken to talk about it, but I'm wondering if that's the case. I just would like to know, is there any further knowledge that you or your guest have about those creatures?
You know, that's a fascinating story, and it does sound like the reptilians would have been involved in that, because they are down, they are deeply down to about 200 miles below the surface of the Earth. So, and I know they have underwater facilities. So right. It does sound logical. It does sound very logical.
These creatures, I'm sure if you Google them, you'll be able to see what they look like. But they do look like reptilian creatures, and they seem, accustomed to their surroundings at that point. Lake Baikal, of course, is the largest by volume lake in the world.
Yeah, that's right. I've heard that. Yes. It does sound very logical that they would have been perhaps reptilians. I agree with that.
And do you think that perhaps there has been a concealment of other aspects of this encounter because it happened in Russia?
Well, if there was a concealment, it would be because the reptilians wanted it to remain concealed. They were the ones, I think, that made sure that it was concealed.
Right. Okay. Well, listen, thank you very much, gentlemen, for answering my question. And Richard, keep up with the good work.
Thank you, Gary. It was great hearing from you. Mr. Prince, my grade 8 teacher. Okay, thank you so much for that. All right. That raises a good question, and that is that whether the other groups are also under control by the reptilians. For example, the Russians were the Soviets during the Cold War under the clutches of the reptilians. The communist Chinese under Mao Zedong.
That's a good question, Richard, and I do know that no human group is able to really beat off the reptilians. They're in complete control. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they had some sort of agreement with perhaps the Chinese or the Russians. I'm not sure. I don't know anything about it, but it's very logical.
All right, we're going to take a time out here. I think, let me just check with Carlos. Carlos, do we have what do we have here, a minute? Yes, we've got about a minute. Let me just ask you this. So we'll pick it up on the other side, but we'll get the conversation going, and that has to do with the Apollo 11 landing on the moon in 1969. So at this point, there was no, Wernher von Braun could no longer stop it. The Americans were going to the moon. They were provided with the technology, but once they get there, there is a little bit of interesting chatter that the public apparently wasn't aware of between Neil Armstrong and Maurice Chatelain, the chief of NASA's communications systems. He revealed this in 1979. We'll give you the details of that conversation between Armstrong as he's setting foot on the moon with NASA back in Houston. We'll do that right after this with Len Kasten, the author of Dark Fleet, right here on The Conspiracy Show.
If you want to support my work here at Strange Planet, please consider becoming an official donor. It's easy. Just go to patreon.com/Strange Planet. There are several donation tiers to choose from $1 per month to $50 a month. For the month of December, new donors at the $10, $20, and $50 per month tier receive a free mug from my Strange Planet shop. Donors in the $20 tier also have their names appear on a crawl during the YouTube live stream of my weekly radio program, The Conspiracy Show. And donors in the $50 tier receive a special on-air thank you on my radio program. Whatever you give, your support helps keep my radio program and this podcast going. Help me pursue the truth wherever it leads. Patreon.com/Strange Planet. Thank you, and God bless.
Dear, but doesn't she sound lovely?
MoveMyPension.ca, the experts in transferring UK pensions to Canada.
Exercising at home is all the rage, but some new workout products can really break the bank. The bike, the mirror, and then the app for a steep monthly fee. I'm Angelica Skinura, host of the 22-Minute Workout. Why spend more to work out when you can subscribe for less to One TV? Access the best fitness shows on TV at your convenience all in one place. Call your cable provider today and ask for it. One TV, Bell Channel 1606 and Rogers Channel 265.
Living with chronic pain changes everything because it changes how you see those things you do every day. Tying your shoes?
Pain.
Climbing those stairs?
Pain.
Vacuuming the house?
So much pain.
Walking around on vacation?
All pain, all the time.
If pain is affecting everything in your life, even the things you like to do, there are options. Book a free health assessment at an Apollo clinic today or visit apolloclinic.ca.
Corporations, governments, and sometimes entire civilizations. What goes up must come down, and it lands on The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio.
Welcome back. A few moments remain with Len Kasten, author of Dark Fleet, the secret Nazi space program and the battle for the solar system. Len, how once again do people get the book?
The book's available on Amazon and also from the publisher, Inner Traditions, and at any Barnes & Noble bookstore. I would recommend getting it through Amazon, though. That's the easiest way to get it.
All right.
Also, I think there's also a Kindle version.
Excellent. So in 1969, Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong sets foot down on the lunar surface, much to the chagrin of many in the U.S. military-industrial complex, but they couldn't, I guess, hold off any longer. There is a legendary conversation, kind of chatter that's going on between Neil Armstrong and, I guess, Control in Houston, which was brought to light back in 1979 from Maurice Chatelain, chief of NASA Communications Systems. Tell me about Maurice and what that chatter was all about.
Chatelain confirmed that Armstrong had indeed reported seeing 2 UFOs on the rim of the crater. And Chatelain said, quote, "The encounter was common knowledge in NASA, but nobody has talked about it until now." And when he says until now, he meant 1979. Soviet scientists were allegedly the first to confirm the incident. And according to our information, the encounter was reported immediately after the landing of the module, said Vladimir Ashaza, a physicist and professor of mathematics at Moscow State University. So NASA covered it up and censored it. But what the conversation went something like this. NASA said, "What's there?" Mission Control calling Apollo 11. And Apollo answered, "These babies are huge, sir, enormous. Oh my God. You wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecraft out there lined up on the far side of the crater edge. They're on the moon watching us." That's the conversation that was picked up by VHF receiving facilities. They bypassed NASA's broadcasting outlets, and they picked up that exchange.
And that's between Neil Armstrong and Houston, that chatter.
Yes, exactly. Yes, but the Russians knew about it.
It kind of makes sense in light of Armstrong's behavior after he comes back to Earth, where he should have been ebullient. He should have been in an incredibly celebratory mood. Here he is, the first man to walk on the moon, and yet there he is standing before journalists. He looks like he's attending a funeral.
Exactly. Well, they let us have that victory. They let Kennedy have that little victory, but after that, everything closed down. And the Nazis took over all of our research facilities and shut them down. And that's why we never went back to the moon.
Why would they not have arranged for the landing module to land in some out-of-the-way place where they wouldn't have encountered these craft? Or did they want them to see them so they would be scared off?
I think it was probably a little bit of both, really. They did want them to be scared off. They did not want them coming back. Since von Braun could not prevent them from making that trip because Kennedy was so insistent on it, they figured they'd let him have that little victory, a little success, and that would be the end of it. And that's exactly what happened. They never went back. Everybody wondered, why didn't they go back to the moon? Why we should have had a complete colony on the moon after that. But it wasn't to be.
Well, 1973 was the last. Was that Apollo 16? Apollo 17?
There was an Apollo 20.
Tell me about Apollo 20. Yeah, you cover that in the book. Tell me about Apollo 20.
There was two astronauts in that. One was Russian, one was American. And they encountered a huge spacecraft I show it in my book. I show the size of it. It was the equivalent of several blocks of Manhattan. And there's a picture in there of how it's compared against Manhattan real estate, and it's huge. And they estimated that it was probably about 1 million years old. That was a belief. It was 11,056 feet long. And it was first photographed by the Apollo 15 spacecraft from overhead. But the Apollo 20 astronauts were able to actually get out and look at it and climb onto it. And that's where they discovered that woman, that creature, she was really human. She looked like, she seemed to be of Mongolian descent. And that's in the book.
Right. This is a preserved body of a female alien pilot dubbed Mona Lisa, discovered on the moon by the Apollo 20 crew. Let me hold that up, and hopefully people can see that. This is for our people streaming us live on YouTube. And then there's a photograph of what she may have looked like while she was alive.
Yes. That picture, the top picture is the one that they found, and the bottom one is the one that how she would have looked by recreation, how she might have looked in life. And she looked just sort of Oriental, very human looking, and it was an amazing discovery.
So Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon, was very outspoken about the fact that UFOs are real, extraterrestrials are real, they're interacting with our government. He made that point very clear before his death. Why didn't he go further? I mean, did he have encounters with extraterrestrials when he walked on the moon? Why didn't he? I mean, he went so far out on the ledge to tell us about extraterrestrials. Why didn't he go that extra distance and tell us about Nazi bases on the moon and alien bases on the moon?
Well, he couldn't become too much of a rebel. Basically, the military was under the control of the cabal. The cabal was a combined German and American military operation. He had to be very careful for the same reason that Eisenhower had to be so careful in his speech and choose his words so carefully. He just couldn't blurt out the truth because everyone would have thought he was crazy, and he would have lost his credibility. he had to go soft. He had to pedal softly, and he knew that. He did what he could. But he could only go so far.
What do you believe? What do you think of the account of Randy Kramer, who claims he was part of the Mars Defense Force, that he was trained on the moon, on the lunar base? I think you also mentioned another pilot, Penny Bradley, in the book. Let's start with Randy Kramer. Do you think he's credible?
Absolutely. I met Randy at a conference in New Mexico. I had long conversations with him. I listened to his presentation. I was utterly convinced that he was telling the truth. And, you have to understand something, that these memories are still buried deep in his subconscious, and he's had to pull them out little by little. So it hasn't been easy for him, but I'm absolutely convinced he was telling the truth. And he was one of several super soldiers, we call them super soldiers, that have been able to recover their memories. And Penny Bradley was another one. And I talk about her, and I devoted a whole chapter to her situation, to her story. And I would recommend that very highly, that people read that, because she was utterly amazing. She was utterly amazing. She was actually a pilot in the Dark Fleet on Mars.
We've just got about a minute here, but what is the current status? Do the Reptilians and the Nazis still have the planet pretty much locked down? Is there any hope that we might be freed from this? What does our future hold?
There's only one way we can win this game. The human race has to develop its consciousness so quickly and so drastically that they will no longer have any effect over us. It's all a consciousness game now. We have to improve our consciousness, expand our consciousness, and once we've done that, then we'll be in control. We'll be in control. They've succeeded by keeping us dumb and dumber, by feeding us nonsense TV shows and movies. Some of them very good, but most of them are just to keep us under wraps. And they're in control. They're in control. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the so-called virus is something that they have created, and I'm quite convinced that they are responsible for it. And I think Carrie Cassidy is also.
At Project Camelot.
Yes, Project Camelot. Yeah.
Len, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for this. Dark Fleet, the secret Nazi space program and the battle for the solar system. I appreciate your time.
I really enjoyed it, Richard. Thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure. Len Kasten. All right, back next week with a brand new program. Hope you'll be along for the ride. My thanks to Carlos Cagini and Ryan White. In the meantime, don't be afraid. There's nothing concealed that won't be revealed, and nothing hidden that won't be made known. What you hear in the dark, speak in the light. What I say in a whisper, proclaim from the housetops. Move over, Aphrodite, I'm coming home. Or at least up the stairs. Good night.